Hello everyone! In the last mod I made in the channel, I taught how to turn your original Nintendo 64 controller into a wireless 64 controller that is also compatible with the Nintendo Switch Online app. The only problem is that installing this mod is very hard. You need to make a ton of tiny connections using even smaller wires. Not to mention you have to use an original Nintendo 64 PCB and you have to remove every component of the board. This leaves a lot of room for mistakes, and you don't want to make any mistakes here. A single point soldered incorrectly will result in a controller that don't read your button presses, or even don't turn on at all. So the perfect solution to avoid this would be making a custom PCB. This way you could reduce a lot of the soldering needed, and all of the connections will be always perfect. I kept thinking about this, but I never actually did it because I have no knowledge on how to make a custom PCB. But then JLCPCB approached me, offering a partnership video to show their custom PCB service. And this was the perfect opportunity to see if I could make it happen. So I installed KCAD, a free PCB design software, and I started messing with it. With a picture of the original Nintendo 64 PCB, I started replicating all of the connections on top of it, and making changes only to the part where it connects to the ESP32 chip. I even added spaces for the extra components, as well as two pads for the battery contacts, and holes for the LED, and what you're seeing is the end result. I even added the logo of the channel and the drill holes to fit perfectly in the Nintendo 64 shell. And in KCAD, you can see the end result fully modeled in 3D like this. Looks pretty good, right? With a couple of clicks on JLCPCB website, you can already see your board and select all of the different options that they provide. You can even choose the PCB color. I choose to make it black, and they also have explanations for all of the other options. And it was pretty cool to follow up the production of the PCB. The package arrived in just 9 days. And here they are. The quality of the PCB is absolutely perfect. All of the components fits in the slots designed for them perfectly. All that's left to do is to solder everything. After soldering everything in place, it was finally time to test it out. But weirdly enough, it wasn't working. Did I do something wrong? After looking at the project files over and over again and checking all of the connections, everything was right. So what could be wrong? Turns out that I made one mistake. You see, in the diagram, all of the connections are made to the back of the chip. But when soldering the chip on my board, the chip is flipped in the other way around. So all of the connections on the left should be on the right and vice versa. Yeah, it was a really dumb mistake. So the only way to test this board was to install the chip in the hard way, which ironically was the reason this board was designed for, to avoid that hard installation. I have to say it was a bit easier in this board because the spaces between the pads are a bit larger. So I made all of the connections, and now the board finally works. All of the buttons work, and it's perfectly playable. In the end, this served as a good lesson. Well, this is what happens when prototyping things, right? You can't expect to get it right in the first try. especially when you have never built a custom PCB before like me. Now I just have to make the changes and order it again. And I learned a few things. On the original board, the contacts have a layer of conductive material. This material makes the contact area a bit higher, making it easier to detect button presses. On my board, there is no material here, so you have to press the buttons a bit harder in order to make the connection and register the button. But I think this can be improved in another version by changing the design of the pads to match the original board. Other than that, everything else is just right. So what do you think of it? Should I try to design a newer version? The thing is, I'm not sure if this board is necessary anymore, because 8BitDo just announced a mod kit that does exactly this, and it's much more polished than my version. It has even a rumble pack, and an extra Hall sensing analog stick to go in the place of the original 64 stick. But now that I know how to design custom PCBs, I can easily make even more projects. And you can do this to other controllers too. Nintendo GameCube, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis. I could even make my own gamepad with a 3D printed shell and buttons. The possibilities are endless. Leave your opinion in the comments and let me know if you want to see a second version of this PCB or a GameCube version or any other controller. The links to JLCPCB website will be in the description of this video. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.